You're watching this right now. I need you to stop everything you're doing, because what I'm going to tell you in the next few minutes is not cheap motivation. It's not self-help talk. It's a spiritual truth that most people will never hear, and that you, specifically you, need to hear today. You have been carrying a weight that has no name, a pain that you can no longer explain to the people around you. A sense that no matter how much you pray, how hard you try, how much you endure, the suffering simply, it won't go away. And you know what's cruelest in all of this? It's not the pain itself, it's the doubt. That voice that whispers in the silence of the early morning, what if this never changes? What if I have been forgotten? But I'm here to tell you something that will change the way you see every tear you've shed to date. What you are experiencing has an expiration date, and that date has already been signed up there. Psychology tells us that human beings can take any how, as long as they find a why. Viktor Frankl survived the worst that human beings can imagine, not because he was different from you, but because he understood that suffering with purpose is completely different from suffering without sense. And the Bible has been saying this for millennia. There is a brutal difference between the person God is testing and the person God is preparing. And this difference changes absolutely everything, because there is suffering that is an attack, and there is suffering that is initiation. There is a cycle that was created to destroy you, and there is a cycle that was created to forge you. And the question I need you to let land in your heart right now is this: what if everything you've been through so far wasn't a sign of abandonment, but proof that you're the exact one the enemy most feared would make it to the other side? Because chosen is not someone who has never suffered. He is the one who survived what was designed to bury him for good. It stays, because what comes next will change the way you see each chapter of your story. There is something that no one has told you about suffering. He is not eternal. He has a limit, and that limit was not defined by his enemies. It was not defined by circumstances, and it was definitely not defined by the size of his pain. He was defined by God before you even entered this season. Think with me. Have you ever noticed how the same pain kept coming back with different faces? One betrayal after another, one loss after another. A new beginning that collapses even before it takes hold. Have you ever wondered why this happened? Why did it seem that no matter how hard you tried to leave, something invisible pulled you back to the same place, to the same standard, to the same sense of defeat? This was no coincidence. It was a cycle. And cycles were designed with a single goal: to drain you to the point where you give up fighting. Darkness is not creative. It recycles what has worked before. If a gun has injured you once, it tries again, and again, and again, until you give in, or until you break the pattern for good. But here's what the enemy didn't calculate. Cycles only work on those who have not yet been cured. And you've been through the fire long enough for healing to happen within you, without you even realizing it. Every time you didn't fall apart when you should have. Every time you got up when you had no strength left. Every time you prayed in the dark, without receiving an answer, and still continued on your knees, you were breaking the cycle at the root, without even knowing what you were doing. Biblical psychology shows us something powerful on this point. The book of Job is not just the story of a man suffering. It's the story of someone who has come full circle. The loss, the silence of God, the pressure of those around him telling him he deserved it all. And who, by not giving in, by not cursing, by not giving up, he exhausted the power of what attacked him. When God speaks at the end, it is not to explain suffering. It is to confirm that Job passed the highest level that exists. And that's exactly what happened to you. The cycle that haunted you did not end because you became stronger in the human sense of the word. It's over because you outlasted him. And when you last longer than the cycle, it collapses in on itself. Lose fuel, lose access. He loses the address of his life. That is why the same situations that once destroyed you now seem distant to you. It's not that they've disappeared from the world. It's that you've stepped out of the frequency where they had power over you. You've grown beyond their reach, and what can't reach you can't hurt you anymore. The pain had a date to end. That date has arrived, the cycle is over, and he's not allowed to come back. Now I need to show you something that will completely change the way you see everything you've been through. Suffering did not come to you by chance. He arrived with terms, with conditions, with an expiration date that was established before you even felt the first pain. Think of suffering as a legal contract in a courtroom you've never seen. Every battle you faced had clauses attached. The permission given to the enemy to touch certain areas of your life has never been permanent. It had a border. There was a limit. And when that limit has been reached, when the purpose of that suffering has been fulfilled within you, the contract has expired. There was no longer any legal basis for him to continue. The Bible shows this with a spine-tingling clarity. In the book of Job, before any suffering came, there was a conversation. There was a negotiation. And within this negotiation, there was a clear limit, so far and no more. Job's suffering was not random, it was contractual. And when the contract expired, the restoration was not gradual. It was immediate, it was doubled, it was overwhelming. The same happened to you. The tears you shed, the prayers you said in extreme tiredness, the nights you almost gave up, all of it was recorded, documented, weighing on a divine scale that you couldn't see but that never stopped working. And when the weight reached the determined point, when the measure was completed, the case was closed. The sentence was given in his favor. And unlike human courts, where cases can be reopened, where lawyers find loopholes, where corruption delays what is right, God's court does not operate like that. When he declares something finished, no force in heaven or on earth can reverse it. What was sealed up there has no recourse down here. That's why you feel a lightness that you can't explain. An eerie calm that doesn't match the circumstances around you. A sense that something has changed, not in your environment, but within you. This is not an illusion. It is not denial. It's your spirit recognizing what your mind is still processing. The contract has expired, the season is over, and it cannot be renewed. You fulfilled what was asked, you paid what was demanded, and the sky marked it as complete. Suffering has not outlasted you. You outlasted him, and now he no longer has any legal right to touch his life. Now I need to tell you something that is perhaps the most liberating thing you will hear today. A significant part of the weight you carried during all these years was not yours. It was never completely yours. Families pass on more than surnames from generation to generation. They pass unhealed wounds, unfinished battles, cycles of destruction that repeat silently for decades, sometimes for centuries, until someone in the lineage decides, consciously or unconsciously, to be the end point, the breaker, which for everything, and that someone was you. That is why his suffering seemed disproportionate to his personal history. You looked around and wondered, why do I carry so much if I didn't do anything to deserve all this? And the answer is deeper than any human logic can grasp. You weren't chosen to carry because you were weak. You were chosen because you were strong enough to endure what others in your lineage could not. Think about how poverty can haunt a family for generations, how relationships that always end in betrayal seem like a pattern that no one can escape, like depression, addictions and failures are repeated from father to son, from mother to daughter, as if they were an inevitable inheritance that no one asked for, but everyone receives. That's not bad luck. It is an accumulated spiritual debt that cries out for someone to pay it off once and for all. The Bible calls some people lineage intercessors, those who are strategically placed in a family not to inherit blessings, but to break curses, not to reap what was planted, but to uproot what was rooted wrong. It is a brutal call, it's lonely, it is misunderstood, and it rarely comes with an explanation, but it comes with purpose. The disruptions you've experienced, the pressures that seem to have no explanation, the constant feeling that you were carrying more than you should, All of this was part of a discharge process. You were paying what your bloodline couldn't pay, breaking what his lineage did not have the strength to break, and by surviving, by not giving in, by continuing to stand even when there was nothing else logical to support you, you zeroed out the debt. Those who come after you will walk on a cleaner road because you have cleaned it. The generation that follows yours will inherit a different lineage, not through suffering, but through your suffering that found purpose and turned into collective liberation. The weight was not only his, but you carried it. And now he's gone, for good. And the lineage will never be the same again. There is a huge difference between surviving something and being transformed by something. And this difference is what separates those who come out of traumatized suffering from those who come out of suffering with authority. Pure survival leaves scars. It leaves you standing, but still vulnerable, still with the same weaknesses, still reacting to the same triggers, still fearing that it will come back. But what happened to you was different. You didn't just survive, you transmuted. Transmutation is a concept that ancient alchemy tried to describe, but that the Bible taught long before. It is the process of taking something that was poison and transforming it into medicine. Take what was weakness and convert it into strength, not to ignore the pain, but to let the pain do the work it was sent to do and come out the other side with something that didn't exist before. Every betrayal you suffered should inject bitterness into your soul. It should close you off, harden you, turn you into someone incapable of trusting, but instead it taught you to recognize what is genuine. Every loss should leave you paralyzed by the fear of losing again. But instead, she taught you the value of what is eternal over what is temporary. Every humiliation should plant shame in the deepest place of you. But instead, she forged a humility that does not bend even in the face of arrogance. This is transmutation, and it is irreversible. What has been transformed within you cannot go back to the previous state. The wisdom that was born from your sleepless nights cannot be uninstalled. The discernment that came from being deceived cannot be erased. You now see what you didn't see before. He feels what he previously ignored. Recognize the danger before it shows its face. Paul wrote about it in a way that cuts deep. He said he gloried in tribulations. Not because he was a masochist, not because he pretended it didn't hurt, but because he knew what tribulation produced. Patience, experience, hope, a chain of transformation that does not happen on days of comfort, which only happens in fire, and you stayed in the fire long enough for the whole transformation to be completed. Now the poison that was used against you has become the antidote that you carry. Pain no longer lives in you as trauma. She lives as an authority, as discernment, like a shield that operates before you even realized you needed protection. The enemy has no new tools to use anymore, because the ones he used before, you absorbed them, processed them, and converted them. He's trying to hurt you with weapons you've already turned into healing instruments, and that, chosen, is what it means to have pain transmuted into a weapon. Now I need you to understand what really happened in the most intense moments of your suffering, when everything seemed to come from all sides at once, when the losses were piled up, when the betrayals were sequential, when the spiritual warfare seemed too suffocating to breathe. That was not strength, it was desperation. The enemy did not attack with everything at once because it was powerful. He attacked with everything at once because he knew that time was running out, that if you survived that avalanche, there would be nothing left that could knock you down. It was a final gamble, a desperate card, the spiritual equivalent of burning all the bridges at the same time because there was no plan B, and you survived. This means something that goes far beyond the obvious. It means that the arsenal is empty. There is no secret reserve of new attacks waiting to be used. Evil is not infinitely creative. He works with patterns, with known wounds, with triggers that have worked before. And when those patterns are exhausted, when those wounds are healed, when those triggers lose their effect, The enemy literally runs out of ammunition. Think about what this means in practice. The same traps that once captured you now look transparent. The same words that once destroyed you now slip away. The same situations that once paralyzed you now barely move you. It's not because you've become insensitive. It's because you've become immune. The Bible describes this in Psalm 91 in a way that seems impossible until you live. 1,000 will fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come to you. This is not empty poetry. It is the accurate description of someone who has left the frequency where the attacks have access, who has risen to a spiritual dimension where the enemy's weapons simply can't reach anymore. And there's something even deeper here. Every attack that failed didn't just stop destroying you. He destroyed something in the enemy himself. Every plot that didn't work, every word that didn't come true, every trap you walked away with, all of it had a cost on the other side. Wasted energy, resources drained, time lost in a battle that was never going to be won. They invested everything in you, and they lost everything. Now they are empty-handed, looking at someone who not only survived, but who became the exact opposite of what they planned. You were supposed to be a warning, a story of failure, a proof that resisting is no use. And instead, you have become living proof that God's power is unmatched by any force that tries to oppose it. Their arsenal is empty, and yours is fuller than ever. Surviving doesn't just prove that you're strong. Surviving changes the place where you exist. And this is something that most people don't understand about the process that you went through. You're not just stronger on the same level, you're operating on a different level, a different frequency, a spiritual dimension where the forces that attacked you simply do not have access. Think so. Suffering, manipulation, destruction, they work at specific frequencies, frequencies of fear, insecurity, unhealed wounds, confused identity. When you were on these frequencies, the attacks found a signal. They found entrance. They found a place to settle and grow. But when you walked through the fire and survived, your frequency changed. Their identity was consolidated in a way that only suffering produces. His wounds were healed, not superficially, but in the deepest layers. And now, the same forces that once found an entrance come to you and find nothing. No sign, no frequency supported, nowhere to settle. That is why provocations no longer arrive in the same way, that the storms that once drowned you now move you much less, that people who used to have power over you seem to have completely lost that power. It's not that they have changed, it's just that you've gotten out of their reach. The prophet Elijah went through this in a powerful way. After his most brutal season, after running from Jezebel, after desiring his own death, after being completely exhausted in the wilderness, God didn't send him back into battle right away. First, he fed him. First, he restored. And when Elias came back, he went back to a different level, not just recovered, high, with an authority that he did not have before the crisis. This is the standard of the chosen ones. The crisis is not the end of the call. It is the transition to a higher level of authority. And now that you've come out of this crisis, that you've gone through what you've gone through and arrived on the other side, you haven't returned to the same level. You went up. And the forces that operated at that previous level simply do not reach you anymore. You can try. They can shoot the same arrows. They can use the same words, set the same traps, try to pull the same triggers. But it's like shooting arrows into the sky. You're just not there where they come anymore. You have been elevated. And spiritual elevation has no turning back. There is something that happens inside those who survive the impossible that science tries to explain and the Bible has described with surgical precision for millennia. It is the development of a spiritual immunity, an internal defense system that operates before your conscious mind even realizes the danger. At first, the trauma took you by surprise. It arrived in places you didn't know were vulnerable. It opened wounds that you didn't know existed. It broke you in ways you weren't prepared to resist. That was not his weakness. It was simply the first contact with a level of war that you had not yet been prepared to face. But survival doesn't leave you the same. It recalibrates you. Every attack you went through educated your spirit. Every betrayal that you identified too late now has a smell that you recognize from afar. Every manipulation that has captured you once now has a pattern that you detect before you complete the first move. Every spiral of destruction that has dragged you down before now has an entrance that your spirit automatically closes before you have to make a conscious decision. This is what the Bible calls discernment. It is not a mystical ability reserved for the few. It is the natural product of one who has been refined by fire. That's what happens when you stop learning about danger from books and start learning from the actual experience of surviving it. Paul talks about the renewing of the mind in Romans 12 as an active process of transformation. But what most people don't realize is that this process of renewal is accelerated dramatically by suffering. The mind that has gone to the limit and returned does not process the world in the same way. She learned shortcuts that only exist for those who have gone through the long road, and your spirit now operates with these shortcuts constantly. This is why certain people who once had access to your energy now can't seem to approach you in the same way. That's why situations that used to hold you back for months now, you solve in days. That's why you feel when something is wrong before you can even explain why, and you're right most of the time. His spirit became a sophisticated immune system, and immune systems do not regress. Once the antibody is formed, it remains. Once discernment is developed, it does not disappear. Once immunity is established, the same virus no longer knocks you down. What tried to destroy you ended up making you indestructible in the areas where you were most fragile. And this is one of the most beautiful ironies of the process that God uses in his chosen ones. In the spiritual dimension, there is a principle that few understand, but that all the chosen ones eventually experience. When the enemy tries to destroy someone and fails, when he uses his best, his most devastating, his most calculated, and the person survives, that failure leaves a mark, not on the person attacked, on the enemy itself, a mark of recognition, an invisible signature that says, this one has been tested at the highest level, this one didn't fall. This one is no longer a candidate for ordinary destruction. This is what the Bible describes when it talks about God's seal on the lives of his own. It is not just divine protection in the abstract sense. It is an active declaration in the spiritual world that this person has been tested in fire, and has emerged intact. And integrity in the face of maximum fire confers an authority that no school, no title, no human achievement can produce. Think of Daniel in the lion's den. What sealed his authority was not only the faith he had before he entered, it was the morning he walked away, without a scratch, in front of a king who was convinced that he would be dead. That way out was the seal. That moment was the proof that no argument could dispute. He thinks of the 3 young men in the fiery furnace. What impressed Nebuchadnezzar was not just that they survived. It was that there was a 4th man with them on fire, and that they left without the smell of smoke on their clothes. That moment was not just survival, it was a demonstration. It was the seal being applied publicly, visibly, in a way that no one present could deny. And you have your own moment like that. It may not have been public, there may have been no human witnesses, but there were witnesses in the spirit world, and they saw it. And what they saw changed what is allowed against you going forward. You carry the seal now, not as decoration, as a functional authority, like a spiritual passport that opens doors that were previously closed and closes doors that were previously too open. What was done to erase you ended up enlightening you in a way that cannot be ignored. And what cannot be ignored cannot be destroyed. You were sealed by the fire that tried to consume you, and that seal is eternal. There are stories that the world decides will not have a happy ending. Situations that by human calculations, by statistical standards, by logical probabilities, should end in collapse, in permanent defeat, in a life that never fully recovers. Yours was one of those stories, at least from the perspective of those who bet against you. You carried losses that should have destroyed your ability to trust for good. You went through betrayals that should have closed you to the world permanently. You faced pressures that should have bent you to a point of no return. And for a while, perhaps for a long time, it seemed that the calculations were right, that collapse was inevitable, that recovery was impossible. And then you stood up, not in a cinematic way, not with background music and dramatic light, but you stood up, slowly, in pain, with doubt, with days that seemed to regress everything that had advanced. But you stood up, and he continued to get up, until getting up became natural again, until breathing without weight became possible again, until the future seemed real again. This is what the Bible calls a resurrection, not just the miracle of Lazarus, not just the empty tomb on Sunday morning, but the spiritual principle that operates in the life of every chosen one who refuses to be dead in the circumstances that were designed to bury him, her. You have become the living contradiction, proof that the calculations were wrong. The evidence that there is one variable that no human statistic can include in the equation, God's hand on a life that he has no intention of letting go to waste. And its presence, simply its existence standing today, disturbs those who bet on its downfall. It doesn't need words. There is no need for confrontation. Your life in motion is the most eloquent answer that exists to everything that has been said against you, to everything that has been plotted against you, to everything that has been bet against you. You have lived the impossible, and now you carry the authority of one who knows, deep in your bones, that if God allowed you to get this far through all of that, there's nothing else that can stop you now. There is a dimension of suffering that goes beyond what the eyes can see and beyond what the mind can process in the moment you are inside it. A dimension where every tear of yours doesn't just fall to the ground, it's picked up. Where every injustice doesn't just happen and pass, it's recorded. Where every night of agony does not dissolve into oblivion, it is documented, weighed, and presented before an authority that does not sleep, does not corrupt, and does not file what should be judged. Psalm 56 says that God keeps his tears in a jar, that they are in your book. This is not sentimental poetry. It is a legal statement. It is the affirmation that there is a record at the top of everything that was unjust, everything that was cruel, everything that went beyond what should have come to you, and records were made to be presented in court. What you have lived has reached the court of heaven. Every moment of unnecessary suffering, each attack that went beyond what was allowed, each wound that was deeper than the purpose required, all of this has an open process, and God is simultaneously the most righteous judge there is and the most powerful advocate you could ever have on your side. Romans 8 says that the Spirit himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. That in the moments when you had no words to pray, when the pain was too great to formulate a coherent sentence, there was an intercession going on your behalf, on a level that your mind can't reach. You have never been without representation in the highest court there is, and the judgment has already been given. The case was closed in his favor. The sentence was pronounced. The one who was allowed to touch his life lost that permission. He who had access to his peace, to his health, to his destiny, that access was revoked by divine decree, And unlike any human judicial system, this decision has no appeal. There is no appeal. There is no bureaucracy that delays execution. When God strikes the hammer, the case is closed, and yours is closed. The process was in his favor. The sentence was freedom. And you are walking now not just as a survivor, but as someone who has been vindicated by the highest court in the universe. There is a difference that changes everything. Tests end on a note, initiations end with a new identity, and what you passed was not a test, it was an initiation. Tests measure what you already know, initiations produce what you were not yet. And there is a brutal difference between leaving a test with a result and leaving a furnace as a different person, with an authority that did not exist before, with a depth that cannot be taught in the classroom, with a resilience that cannot be feigned in front of those who have seen up close what you have gone through. The Bible is full of initiations. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before he saw the burning bush. Not 40 days. 40 years. A prince of Egypt, trained in the best school of the most advanced civilization of the ancient world, having to learn to be a shepherd in the middle of nowhere before God appeared and said, "Now you are ready." Not ready for training, ready for emptying. David was anointed king and then returned to take care of the sheep. And then he spent years running away from Saul, living in caves, leading a group of indebted and bitter men, without a throne, without a palace, without any outward sign that the anointing was real. David's initiation was not the day of anointing. It was every day of escape after her, every cave, every moment he could kill Saul and chose not to, each psalm written in the genuine despair of those who did not see how the promise was going to be fulfilled. And when the throne finally came, it came to a man completely different from the young man Samuel anointed. It came to someone who had been formed by suffering into something that comfort could never have produced. This is what happened to you. Pain was not only an obstacle in the way of his destiny, it was the way. It was the process of formation that produced who you needed to be before you could receive what God had prepared. And initiations are not repeated. No one is started twice at the same level. You've crossed the threshold. You entered the fire as one person and came out as another. And this transformation is irreversible. What you are now cannot be undone. The authority you carry cannot be taken away. The depth that has been formed within you cannot be erased. You've been initiated, and initiates carry a weight of glory that the uninitiated simply cannot see, but that the spirit world immediately recognizes. Here's something the enemy never told you, and that he'd do anything to make you never understand. War has a cost. And the war that was waged against you cost much more on the side of the attacker than on the side of the one who resisted. Every plot that was devised against you drained energy from those who devised it. Every evil word that was spoken about his fate consumed something of the one who spoke it. Every alliance that has been formed to ensure your downfall has been an alliance built on the fuel of obsession. And obsession is one of the most autophagic resources in existence. It consumes the host while attempting to consume the target. And you were the target that didn't fall. This means that all the investment, years of strategy, of directed energy, of spiritual and human resources poured into its destruction, has resulted in zero return. In fact, it resulted in a loss. Because while they were spending trying to take you down, you were being forged. While they were investing in your defeat, you were accumulating the authority that comes from surviving what they threw at you. They have become weaker. You got stronger. And now they look at you and see the picture of their failure, not a defeated enemy, but living proof that all the investment was wasted. That everything that was planned didn't just fail. It failed in a way that produced the opposite of what they wanted. There is a devastating spiritual principle here that the Bible describes in the book of Esther. Haman built a gallows 50 cubits high to hang Mordecai. and he was hanged on it. The trap he built to destroy God's chosen one became the instrument of his own destruction. What was designed to bury the righteous ended up as the tomb of the unrighteous. This is no biblical coincidence. It is a spiritual pattern, and it was fulfilled in your history as well. The forces that have been mobilized against you are exhausted, spiritually exhausted, without resources to restart the same war. And even if they tried, they'd be entering a battlefield where you now have the absolute advantage because you've survived the worst they had, and they know it. You didn't just survive the war. You beat it in a way that left the opposite side unable to try again. There is a prison that does not need bars. It does not need chains. It doesn't need guards. It is built entirely from the inside, and it is one of the most powerful that exists, because whoever is in it cannot blame anyone but himself. It is the prison of the memory of failure. His enemies live in that prison now, and they live there because of you, not because you did anything to get them there, but because their survival was the key that locked the door from within. Think about what happens in the mind of those who planned your downfall and saw you get up. They remember the nights they spent architecting, from the conversations they had about you, of the certainty they carried that this time you wouldn't be able to take it, from the confidence that the word they spoke, the trap they set, the blow they struck, it was going to be the last chapter of their story. And then you got up. That image of you standing when you should be on the ground won't go away. It settles in, it echoes, it appears in the quietest moments, in the moments when they try to rest, in the moments when they try to convince themselves that it wasn't for that long. But it is, and they know it is. Nothing humbles more deeply than seeing someone prosper after you've used everything you had to make sure they wouldn't prosper. It is the most personal defeat that exists, because it's not just strategic failure. It is the failure of an entire narrative, from a conviction that you were weak, from a belief that God wasn't really with you, and his life on the move refutes all this. Silently, continuously, daily. You don't have to take revenge. You don't have to confront. You don't even have to think about them. Your blossoming existence is already doing the job. Every step you take toward your destiny is a reminder to them that they have failed. Every achievement of yours is a scar on the narrative they have built about you. Every time someone who bet on their downfall is faced with their rise, they are forced to revisit the failure. This is the silent judgment that the Bible describes when it says that God prepares a table before us in the presence of our enemies. It is not a table of humiliation of them. It is a table of honor of ours, which they are obliged to witness, that they cannot ignore. That screams louder than any direct confrontation ever could. Live well, live free, live to the fullest. That's all you need to do. The rest is already being done by you in the heart of those who tried to stop you. And now we have reached the moment that everything that has been said here was building. The moment that each block, each truth, each revelation was preparing you to truly receive. You have entered the post-victory phase, not the recovery phase, because recovery assumes that you're going to go back to what you were before. And you won't. It cannot. There is no longer what you were before you went through what you went through. That person was dismantled, was refined, was rebuilt into a version that cannot be regressed to the previous state. What you have entered now is revelation. Revelation is different from recovery. Recovery looks back and tries to restore. Revelation looks ahead and finds out what was produced. Recovery is about fixing what broke. Revelation is about displaying what has been forged, and what has been wrought in you is extraordinary. The wisdom that was born from his early mornings in despair has no academic equivalent. The empathy that was developed in your seasons of deepest pain cannot be taught in any course. The spiritual authority you carry, built layer by layer through every battle you have survived, this authority is recognized in the unseen world before it is visible in the physical world. You are now exactly the person your destiny needed you to be. Not despite the suffering, because of him, through him, transformed by him in ways that comfort could never have produced in any amount of time. And now the life that opens up in front of you is not the continuation of what you have lived. It is a chapter written in a different language, with different features, with a different level of favor, with doors that respond to a key that only exists for those who went through what you went through. Revelation describes overcomers, those who have passed through the great tribulation, as having their robes washed and bleached in the blood of the Lamb. It is an apparently paradoxical image. How does something turn white when washed in blood? But that's exactly it. The process that should stain was the process that purified. What should be darkened was what lit up. What he was supposed to destroy was what he consecrated. That's you now. Not stained by what you went through. Purified by him, not diminished by suffering. Elevated through it, not defined by your losses, crowned by your survival of them. Every step you take from now on carries the weight of everything you have gone through. Not as a burden, as a foundation, as the most solid foundation there is, built not of theory, not of easy faith, not of beautiful words on days of comfort, but of faith that withstood the real fire, the real silence, the real pain, and came out the other side still standing. This is what it means to be chosen. He was not chosen despite all this. He was chosen for all this, to go through, to be forged, to emerge as living proof that God's power is real, that God's purpose cannot be aborted, and that God's destiny over a life cannot be stolen by any force that rises up against it. The last storm has passed, and what is left after it is you, more real, deeper, freer, more empowered than you have ever been before. This is his revelation. This is your time. And there is no turning back.